and your video, except for Cliff. You need to leave yours on, and
We're
so
now
that we can get the best bandwidth.
We're recording now.
All right, thank you, Dawn. All right, good morning. Can you see me? Because I'm not seeing myself.
I can see you.
All right. Thank you. Good morning and happy Father's Day to all you dads out there. This is a chalice lighting by Steve Stock, and we light this chalice to celebrate the inherent worth and dignity of every person. To reaffirm this historic pledge of liberal religion, to seek that justice which transcends mere legality and moves toward the resolution of true equality, and to share that love which is ultimately beyond even our cherished reason, that love which unites us. And also a poem for you this morning entitled Mattering. And this kind of goes along with what's been going on lately, and some good things and some very bad things are happening. And so let's make some good things happen and make it matter. This is by Mark Hicks. My father asked if I am gay. I asked, does it matter? He said, not really. I said, yes. He said, get out of my life. I guess it mattered. My friend asked why I talk about race so much. I asked, does it matter? He said, no, not really. I told him yes. He said, you need to get that chip off your shoulder. I guess it mattered. My neighbor asked why I put that ramp up to my front door. And I said, does it matter? He said, no, not really. So I told him because it made my life easier. And he said, is there a way to make it less obvious? So I guess it mattered. A member of my church asked why I like gospel music. And I asked, does it matter? And she said, no, not really. I told her that it connects me to my Southern Christian childhood. And she said, I think you're in denial about your oppression. I guess it mattered. My God asked me, do you love yourself? I said, does it matter? She said, yes. I said, how can I love myself? I am gay, Latino, disabled, and a Christian in a hostile climate. She said, that is the way I made you. Nothing will ever matter again. Today, it is my pleasure to introduce Cliff Jackson. He is returning to our pulpit. And Cliff was born in Cleveland, Ohio, but found home in Florida in 1969. He went to FTU, now called UCF, and got his bachelor's degree in organic chemistry. He married Kathy, his wife of 45 years, has two daughters, Lisa and Sandra, has two grandchildren, Aiden and Annalise. He started and ran a small chemical manufacturing business from 1980 to 1995, Since he sold his business in 1995, he has been very active at his UU board as a UU board member on most committees and ministerial search committee twice at the Ormond in UU. He has facilitated a weekly spiritual growth group there for 21 years, and he has been a Toastmaster for 12 years. He also likes to fish. Before I go any further, I need to actually light the chalice. because it matters. Cliff's presentation is entitled Aphantasia, A New Window into the Mind. And I think it's going to be very interesting. So Cliff, we're glad to have you.
Good morning. It's so nice to be with you again this morning. Isn't Zoom wonderful? I know it's not the same as being together, but to see and talk with each other as a group really helps us stay connected. There are perks too. No travel time, no worries about wind and rain. I can even wear a shirt and pajama bottoms and you would never know. Happy Father's Day to any of you who are fathers, or if you had a father or have a father. I know that might be harder for some of you than others. I loved my father, but there are some ways that the kindest thing that I can say is that he taught me how not to be a father. I was lucky enough to have forgiven my father before he died. The way I see it is that there's a sense of freedom that comes with forgiveness. As long as I was rebelling or submitting, he was still in control of my life. Giving this talk on this day gave me an unexpected gift to share. Last time I was here, I shared my thoughts on living in the simplest terms, choosing to be separate or connected. Since then, I found out that I am different than 99% of you. My brain is wired differently than yours. This realization has given me a whole new level of appreciation for that UU saying, we don't have to think alike to love alike. Have you ever been blindsided? It can happen in so many ways. In sports like football or basketball, at work, in relationships, or sitting in your car. The result is always the same. You're knocked for a loop by something that you did not see coming. There is a time of being dazed while you are gathering your senses. Finally, there's a period of time that it changes some aspect of your life. At 9:30 a.m., May 11th, 2018, my sister called and blindsided me. That morning, Gail told me that she and her son, John, had aphantasia. I had no idea what aphantasia was until she told me that they could not form any mental images. She said, imagine a picture of mom. Can you see her? My almost instant response was, oh my gosh, I've got it too. When she told me that only 2% of people are not able to form mental images, I was metaphorically floored. I was 67 years old and I had never had a clue. On the contrary, I believed that everyone was just like me. Dazed, I hung up with Gail and looked up aphantasia in Encyclopedia Britannica. I hope this audience would get that joke. Actually, I Googled aphantasia and found out Francis Galton first described the condition in his paper, Statistics of Mental Imagery, published in the journal Mind in 1880. Galton was the originator of using statistics interpreting human sociological data sets. Galton was quite famous in his time. He was doing a number of sociological studies and applying statistics to interpret that data. And he was also the inventor of eugenics, the idea of superior and inferior races. He is also probably the first person to fudge data in his statistical interpretations. Perhaps that is one reason his paper was ignored or unnoticed for 130 years. I was dumbfounded. Vision is our predominant sense. I was curious. Some might say I was driven to find out what woke up this Rip Van Winkle. And Google had the answer. In 2003, a man referred to as Mr. X or as MX had a heart catheterization and had a minor stroke. He fully recovered from the stroke, but lost his ability to form mental images. His doctor sent him to Dr. Zeman, a neurology professor at Exeter University. Dr. Zeman studied MX for 7 years, Mr. X. And Dr. Zeman published a paper describing this first known person who lost the ability to form mental images. Very quickly, 17 people responded that they had not been able to form mental images all their life. Dr. Zeman coined the term, it's actually the proposed name for the condition, aphantasia, in his paper, Congenital Aphantasia, in 2015. Sometime in 2015, Dr. Zeman got funding to start to study aphantasia. On his website, he was asking for people to participate in his study, and he still is. I was excited. I jumped in by enrolling and taking his VVIQ test, vividness of visual imagery questionnaire. And it fed my data right into his database. It was 16 simple questions that just take a few minutes and addresses the whole spectrum of mental imagery from aphantasia, no imagery, to hyperphantasia, extreme imagery. I sent e-forms of the test as well as the bell curve to Connie, and I don't know if she's already sent them out or she has them available anyway. If any of you care to see where you are on that continuum after service. There are no right or wrong answers. It's just about self-discovery. I tested the lowest possible score, 16, with no imagery. I was then led to a more detailed 32-question test that had comment boxes for each question, as well as a numerical rating. One question jumped out at me. Question: can you see an image with your eyes open as well as with your eyes closed? Of course, I answered no. But in the comment box, I wrote, "This is a ridiculous question. How could anyone see something that is not there and not see something that is there? This is absurd." I was so agitated with this question. I went right over to my wife in the other room and read her this preposterous question. Her response was, "Well, duh. Of course I can see images with my eyes open or closed." I encouraged her to take the VVIQ test right then. She did and tested the highest possible hyperphantasia. It was an aha moment for both of us. Almost every day we have a reminder and a new awareness of how we see the world differently. Let me jump back into those first few hours of mad scientist mental wheels turning, smoke coming out of ears. I want to know more. I started filling in the comment boxes as if I was having a conversation with Dr. Zeman. I wonder if you can have aphantasia in other senses as well. You might want to check on that. And obviously, there's a genetic component. I will check with my children and siblings and report my findings. To my great surprise, a couple days later, Dr. Zeman did respond to my comments by email. They have found that 50% of people with aphantasia are aphantasic in all modalities. Little did I know, I actually am a 1%er, but not monetarily. He also said they would be most interested in all of my family tree data that I could provide. I quickly realized that I am aphantasic in all modalities. I found out that my brother does have aphantasia, and my sister and brother and I am almost positive, we are almost positive, got it from our dad. I was relieved to find out that our 2 daughters and 2 grandchildren do not have aphantasia. By the next 3 days, I found out that aphants often have SDAM, severely deficient autobiographical memory. We don't have many memories of our past, and the ones that we do have are in third person. He went to his first day of kindergarten when he was 5. By this time, this mad scientist had really slowed down in wanting to know more. I was thinking, how in the world did I cope? How did I not know this? I became very aware of how different I am. There is a difference between being different and being unique. Being different can be a lonely and fearful state of mind. To change my frame of mind, I began thinking about the advantages of being aphantasic. I don't daydream. I never get a song stuck in my head. I never have hallucinations. I never get food cravings like, oh, don't think about chocolate. And no smells in my mind. Now that's a great advantage. When I was 13, we went to our cabin in the woods on a lake in Michigan. It was 100 miles and 100 years away from Chicago. Our little city dog, Heather, was a Cairn Terrier, a 7-pound ball of fur. She loved the woods. She would jump out the window before the car even stopped and run off into the woods. Her nose told her of deer and snakes and snails, turtles and possums. What she didn't know was that a skunk with its tail up was not an invitation to sniff. I think that skunk was laughing so hard it sprayed her 3 times. It sure smelled like it, she did. I got the job of washing Heather again and again. I remember it was horrific, but I don't have the smell in my head. No images, no voices, no smells or tastes in my mind. I'm kind of like a natural at meditation. One of the first things that Dr. Zeman had to do was to answer the skeptics who said, there is no aphantasia. It's just a figment of your imagination. He answered the skeptics with 2 elegant and quite different proofs. The first proof had a subject who could see mental images sit in a booth that had a partition between their eyes, and two different objects would be flashed before each eye at the same time. For instance, a coffee mug to the left and a bird to the right. The response was consistently random. Sometimes the right object and sometimes the left object was what the subject said that they observed. Next, they very briefly flashed one of the objects, say the bird, before the longer test flash. Now, the subject told the object that had been given as a hint much more often. When the subject was the person with aphantasia, the seen object remained random, with or without a hint. The second proof was much more technical than elegant, but it was quite effective. Skeptics were disproven simply by showing the brain activity of people who could see mental images compared to people who could not. People who could form mental images had the same portions of their brain light up when they saw an actual image and when they imagined an image. When people with aphantasia saw an actual image, the same visual center and prefrontal cortex lit up, but when they imagined an image, their semantic memory center lit up. The way my memory works, the way I cope, is that everything goes into my long-term general information memory. Your memories are like your book of life with pictures and touch and taste, sounds and smells. My memory is my book of life with just the words. It's extremely hard for me to imagine your world. I do have a little thought experiment to help you see my world. Take a pen and a piece of paper, or imagine one. Now close your eyes and imagine a blank blackboard. Focus, concentrate intently on seeing that blank blackboard. See every detail of that blank blackboard. Now draw a square without looking on that piece of paper. No cheating seeing the image of a square on the blackboard or on the paper. Focus on that blank blackboard. I'm hoping that you have to struggle not to see the image of the square and then think that a square is 4 equal length lines connected at their ends at 90 degrees. I always have the blank blackboard, and I always have to think of something with no image. I joined Toastmasters 10 years before I found out I had aphantasia. I knew that Toastmasters was important for me, but I did not really understand why. One of the first articles I read in their monthly magazine was by a man who coached people who were going to give a TED Talk. He said, "Don't just tell your story, relive it." Looking for memories of stories for speeches and sermons was looking out at a vast ocean where raindrops of memories were constantly falling in and are lost to the sea. But scattered here and there were islands. When I visited those islands, I landed on the most emotional moments of my life. One of those islands was the convergence of moving from Sanford to Ormond Beach. It was leaving working for someone else and starting a new business. It was the transition from married couple to having our first child. It all came back to me. We had everything planned out. We set up the business 3 months early, moved 1 month early. But Lisa had her own plans. She decided to come 1 month early too. 7 pounds of total chaos. But there was the pure joy of remembering her opening one eye and looking at me. And then she closed it. And then she opened both eyes. Our eyes connected for an instant of eternity. Another island I visited was when our younger daughter, Sandra, was a senior in high school. At the beginning of the year, she approached us with the idea of going to India for the summer. Her best friend was from India, and she was going to stay with relatives. Gurpreet thought it would be marvelous to show Sandra the real India. Kathy and I were not totally on board. Sandra had only traveled to Costa Rica for 2 weeks. Her older sister had been to Europe for several months. Somehow, 7 months out, it seemed like a better idea that the 18 and 21-year-old sisters should go together to India. It could have been a plot. There were several months of blissful ignorance filled with gleeful planning of the sights they would see. Plane tickets was one wake-up alarm. This is really happening. Only 2 months to travel day, oversized luggage carefully underpacked, leaving room for exotic treasures. That was about the time that reality struck like a wrecking ball to a glass house. They had to get their shots. What I remember was a top 20 list of the all-time most deadly diseases in history. Smallpox, malaria, dengue fever, bubonic plague, tetanus, cholera, pneumonia, and many more that I'd not even heard of. What were we thinking? We're sending our daughters to certain doom in 2 weeks. No way. Stop. Cancel. So what if we lose the ticket money? I don't even have a passport. Right in the middle of that parental terror, about a week before they were supposed to leave, our daughters gathered us up to sit on our king-sized bed, small circle, both daughters together, both parents together. Sandra pulled out a little children's book called Love You Forever. It's the story of a mother loving her son through all of the stages of his life. It started out, a mother held her new baby and very slowly rocked him back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And while she held him, she sang, I'll love you forever, I'll like you for always, as long as I'm living, my baby you'll be. Page after page, Sandra read the antics of the infant, the toddler, the young boy, and what the teenager would do. And the mother would swoop him up and rock him back and forth, back and forth. And Lisa would sing, I'll love you forever, I'll like you for always, as long as I'm living, my baby you'll be. The boy grew up to be a man, and the mother still swooped him up and rocked him back and forth, and sang to him. And then one day the mother became too old and sick to swoop him up. And instead, he swooped her up and he rocked her back and forth, and he sang to her, I'll love you forever. I'll like you for always. As long as I'm living, my mommy you'll be. All of the time, our girls were reading and singing. We, of course, were remembering this is what we lived. Lisa sang that switched chorus, and we all just melted together into a crying, hugging, loving puddle in the middle of that bed. That much love drowned out our fear. The girls went to India and had the experience of a lifetime. When the girls returned, there was a time that they were telling the story to Aunt Gail, my sister. They included the chaos of the pre-trip terror and the Love You Forever book. Gail was moved by the story and got the idea of her and me reading, singing it to our parents. It was just before Christmas. They were 80 years old. I read and Gail sang. Once again, by the end of the book, we were a puddle of 4 in the center of their bed. That was the first time I ever saw my father cry. My mother had a house and gardens looking apartment on the 19th floor of their condo, a place for everything and everything in its place. That little book rested in the place of honor, the center of the glass tabletop coffee table in their living room for the rest of her life. I've found many of these island memories. None of them have images, but they are vivid. They came back to life for me to share. Apparently, I am not aphantasic in all modalities. I am able to relive emotions. It is my connection to all of you. My awakening to my aphantasia has really just begun. We are in the infancy of understanding the condition. They are still in the process of gathering data. I fully expect a host of new discoveries from the interpreting of that data. I've come to see aphantasia as neither good nor bad, but as a fascinating window into the workings of the mind. In the middle of the night, last night, I realized that my father was aphantasic in all modalities, and he had no emotional memories either. None of my islands. That must have been sad for him. There are so many aspects of the human condition that can be represented by a wide spectrum, like aphantasia to hyperphantasia, short to tall, skin color from white to dark, and so on. Each one could easily be a source of feeling different. I think the journey of finding our path from the isolation of difference to embracing the gift of our uniqueness may very well be the purpose of life. As Dr. Brené Brown says, sharing our vulnerabilities is how we connect. It is the source of joy, peace, creativity, and love. A more expanded phrasing of my theme might be, we need not think or look or be alike to love alike. May it be so.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That was great. That was wonderful. And we're going to have some comments and so forth on it. And I see some thumbs up and we can have a little discussion. I don't know if anybody read the information I sent out yet. I read some of it, and I think that I'm probably somewhere between up there with not really hyper, but more than average maybe for visual. Does anybody have a question or a comment for Cliff? I appreciate his talk. It was very moving, and I was about in tears with him telling me the story of I Love You Forever, and I wrote down the name of the book. So
I didn't quite understand how to use this questionnaire.
Okay, so you take the questionnaire and you rate what you think you rate from a 1 to a 5. And then when you're done answering all the questions, just add up your total. And I had a 1 all the way down, so I was a 16, pretty easy addition. My wife was a 5 all the way down, so she was an 80. And whatever your total is, then there's a bell curve graph. It doesn't.
Oh, the second page, is that what that was?
Yeah.
Graph, oh yeah, sorry.
And now there's 2 graphs on that piece of paper. One of them is not a bell curve. It's just the people that were the 17 responders that said, hey, I've been aphantasic my whole life. That is what they tested out as being. Most of them were 16ers like I am. But the other curve that has the bell curve, now that test sample, they'll have probably a more accurate curve as time goes along, but that was the first one that I saw. And it didn't have anyone in that group that tested that was down in the below, I think, 22, but it at least will give you an idea.
But isn't it also a metaphor?
What's that?
Isn't this also a metaphor? I'm thinking, my parents were this way, but how would I know, really? I also saw it as not necessarily real, but a metaphor for different types of people. I guess I was off.
No, it's the hard wiring of our brain is different in some people. And as I said, that the clearest description though is that my memories go to that general semantic memory rather than the visual and prefrontal cortex. So you guys really are wired differently, unless you're also a 16 or 18 or 19, then you and I might be similar.
I think Dave and Pam are next.
Okay, hello, can you hear me?
Uh-huh.
Thank you. I have one question. Do you dream?
Yes, now it is totally separate wiring. So I do dream in color. I did not know, I don't remember many dreams, but I did spend months trying very hard to remember dreams. And I was so excited when I remembered a dream and I saw it in color. So and Dr. Zeman did confirm that most people can still dream even with aphantasia.
Okay, was that Pam Ricker or was that Dave and Pam?
No, it's Pam Ricker.
Oh, okay. Okay, so Dave and
Somehow
Pam were first. I'm sorry.
Okay. Did Pam and Dave talk already?
Not yet.
Yeah, question about dreaming.
Oh, the dream? Okay, I thought Pam Ricker was talking about the dreams. Okay, Pam Ricker, did you already discuss what you wanted to discuss?
I don't know what I've done to it, but you can't see me anymore, but you can hear me, right?
Right.
Yes.
Okay, my question is, if you have a degree of aphantasia, does it keep you, say a low, like low on the scale, does it keep you from abstract thoughts like poetry and so forth, things that you can't visualize, abstract thoughts? Is this a form of aphantasia?
someone with aphantasia coined a word, conceptualizer. And I think that kind of is a helpful distinction. I still imagine, I am creative and have imagination, but it's more of a conceptual nature. In our discussion groups, we'll have a topic and most people will be down into the nitty-gritty of whatever the topic was. And time and again, I would see this expansive view of whatever the topic is. So I think that with it going into my general knowledge memory, I think I have a tendency to see things from the big picture a lot. I don't know if that helps answer your question. So I do have memories. I don't ever see pictures. If I have an idea of making a slide or something, I will then draw it. And I'm a very poor artist, but it would get the job done. But yes, in art class, the art teacher would tell me to imagine a horse and then draw it. No, that doesn't work.
No.
I was talking with a woman at Toastmasters, and I told her about this in a break between things we were doing. And she just had this wonderful look of, aha. And she told me that she's an art teacher, and she knew that she had had some students that she would be telling them repeatedly, just imagine it and draw it. And she said, oh my gosh, every art teacher should know about this.
Yes, they should. And people maybe with 2 left feet, as far as dancing, it might affect them. They can't imagine their right and left foot doing a certain thing. So it might impair their ability to move a certain way too, because they can't visualize it.
Well, now I have my excuse for my inability to dance.
Yeah, interesting. Thank you. Let's see, I think Margot was next.
Hi. I'd like to ask Cliff, if your wife is a 5 and you're a 1, on a practical basis, what does that mean when you want to do anything or think anything or discuss anything?
Oh, it has actually been so helpful because before we knew this, we were clueless. She would tell me, why do you need the GPS to get from church to home? She has always got the map in her mind of wherever we're going and wherever we've been. And I am always blank blackboard. So as I say, it has really been helpful for us that it helps us bridge the gap between how we see the world, because she has difficulty imagining my world and I have her the same difficulty, but now at least we know we see 2 different worlds, and that's helpful.
That's amazing. Thank you.
Welcome.
Okay. I am not seeing hands, so let me see. Linda?
Excuse me a second. Did the fact that you didn't need a map mean you got lost or you got home without the map?
I think that GPS is the most wonderful thing ever invented.
Okay, because I'm like,
I take it with me into the shower.
Now, Connie reminded me, I was a competitive horse person, and some of my friends could read about horse riding. A little more pressure on your left tushy or your right calf, and I couldn't read and translate it into a picture or a body movement. And it's just a comment that I understand.
I'm with you there.
Let's see. I am going to look for some more hands.
Robert?
I see Jean Brown. Hi, Jean.
And Bob Benner also.
was waving.
And Sandra is Cliff's daughter. So I want to say hi to Sandra because I've known her since she was a kid. Our son and Sandra were in youth group together.
I had a question about correlation between this condition and jobs, artists, etc. In other words, is there the people that are doing the gathering of data, have they done any work on that? And conversely, the opposite side, you called it hyper aphantasia. Is there correlation with people that are hyper, or is that a normal? Is hyper normal?
Well, hyperphantasia, they have found, and it's not total across the board, but very frequently people with hyperphantasia find themselves being illustrators for children's books, where they're given one line, girl picking strawberries, then hyperphantasia, she's a little polka dotted dress and a bucket and the leaves and everything. So that is, so it very well might be that for cartoon illustrators and so on, where the ability to have this incredible visual image available with the tiniest little bit of information, wherever that's needed, I think you would probably find a high proportion of hyperphantasics there. Conversely, now, it is not uncommon for hyperphantasic people to have something that is very desirable. I think in Google, when it was very young or something, or even now, there are something like 5 or 6 people in a group of 20 of the conceptualizers that have aphantasia. So imagineering that you don't have to see something, but how something works or would work. But as I say, this study is so new, it's 5-year-old infant. We don't know all of the